My children really love Dr. Seuss, and if you have children, you knew when they're young they really do love Dr. Seuss, and this feels a bit Dr. Seuss-ish here. Listening to Mark on stage, it was almost blurring into very Dr. Seuss. When my children were young, Jake was 6, Sophie was 4, they were sitting by the home computer, the one home computer connected to the internet. So I realised that dates me and my children. You can guess what their ages are now, because at last count there were 36 devices connected to the internet at home. And Jake and Sophie were sniggering in front of the computer, and I thought, well, this is interesting. Let's go check what they're looking at. And to my dismay, I caught them Googling rude bits. You can imagine what the internet delivers up when you go. I don't recommend you do that at home. And from that moment forward, I decided the computer stays in plain sight of mum or dad so we can watch what our children do. My son's now 19, so when he is at home, he spends most of his time in his bedroom. And to be honest, what he does in his bedroom, I really don't want to know. But as a parent, I do care about what even my 19-year-old son's up to. And I've learned that if you ask the right questions at the right time, you can actually have a conversation and figure out what's happening in your son or daughter's life. And I remember asking Jake a question one day, and he was really angry. And picture this, an angry 19-year-old young man. He was really angry, and I thought, wow, what's this about? I'm glad I asked. He loves playing online games, and he proceeded to tell me how he was getting killed more often on the games because these guys and girls he was playing, most likely guys, no judgments there, were actually attacking his home computer to lag his performance. He was outraged. So as a responsible parent, I had a good conversation with, yes, isn't that terrible that sadly there's a small percentage of people out there who will do nasty things? That's life. This is how you deal with it. Obviously something you shouldn't do yourself. That advice failed because some weeks later, asking the same question or another question, different Jake, animated Jake, he jumps up out of his seat when I come home, which is rare that he greets me that way. Dad, you got to come into my bedroom and see what I've done, show you what, and he was really excited, and I thought, fantastic. The other thing that popped into my head at that time was, thank goodness I bought that hazmat suit from Bunnings last weekend. I knew I had a reason for it, because I was stepping into his bedroom. I'm joking there. But all jokes aside, I went to the bedroom and he proceeded to show me what he'd done. So what did he do? He'd figured out the identity of the people attacking him. I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. Go son. Even better, he'd figured out how to protect our home internet connection from this denial of service attack. That's my boy. Well done. As a security professional, I thought, brilliant. Well done, son. He then proceeded to show me what else he had figured out to do. And he'd figured out how to attack them back so he could beat them online. And I had one of those split moments. As his dad, maybe as a bloke, I was like, fantastic, son, the chip off my old block, you suck it to them, right, stick it to them, all that good stuff. But as I'm doing that in my head and doing my little happy dance, I'm realising that I'm Telstra's Chief Information Security Officer. And I know that when gamers attack gamers, because sadly we see lots of this on our network, because it does impact some performance in some areas, that you're not just impacting the computer you're attacking, it might be, depending on what technology you're on, you might be kind of disrupting the suburb. Not good. So professional, reputational issues for me there. But also, I had to explain to my son that I knew what he was doing was illegal, and he had a personal risk he needed to consider. You can imagine how well that conversation went down. He doesn't do it anymore. If there are any policemen in the room, he doesn't do it anymore. The moral of that story is if you ask questions, you can find out what's going on. My key message today, this thing called cybersecurity and the risk that we face, if you ask the right questions of your organisation, if you ask the right questions of your supply chain, and if you ask the right questions of the data that you already have about your business and how it's operating, you can manage this risk effectively. But before I talk about why cybersecurity is such a big deal, it's also important to call out, it's not about cybersecurity. This is very much about the opportunity afforded to everyone as a result of the benefits, the great benefits of technology and connectivity. And at this point, I would like to acknowledge Jennifer Westacott, the CEO of Business Council Australia. Jennifer and I sat on the Prime Minister's independent panel advising on the cybersecurity strategy. And one of the many things that Jennifer brought to the panel and the great debates we had is to keep reminding us this is not about national security, this is not about cybersecurity, this is about the benefits to everyone, the consumer, the business, and it's about the opportunity. And it's always important to remember that. If you're in a security profession, it's not about that as much as you should be a good professional. It's about your business, your customers, and the opportunity afforded for both of them. And actually, it's even bigger than that. There is no doubt the Australian economy needs to diversify. This is a conversation we had on the panel. One way we can diversify as a country, our economy, is to do new great things on the back of this great connectivity and use of technology. Underpinning technology and connectivity is this thing called cybersecurity. And if you get that right and you manage the risk effectively, you can prosper personally and your business can prosper, and that's good for Australia, that's good for everyone. Always important to remember, start at that point around the opportunity. So why though? What's the big deal about cybersecurity? Isn't it funny? We love to put the word cyber in front of something and we think we've come up with something new. We love to take a word like activism and change it to hacktivism, and all of a sudden we've come up with something new. Well, actually, there is nothing new in cybercrime. It's just crime. Cyber espionage is just espionage. Hacktivism is just hacktivism is just activism or protest by online means. But what is different today if there's nothing new? And in fact, I had an interesting debate with a colleague the other day. Yes, okay, stealing a file, an electronic file off a computer is a new form of crime, but it's just crime. So there's nothing new in this. The one thing that makes this significant, its technology and connectivity mean that crime, espionage, protest, and let's not forget mistakes, because it's easy to sit here and listen to presentations and think about there's these big bad hackers out there that will steal stuff from me. Actually, think about your own staff. Think about the staff in your supply chain. And I'm not talking about bad people, the very small percentage of people who are bad. Think about inadvertent actions, mistakes. Crime, espionage, protest, and mistakes can now happen at a pace, scale, and reach which is unprecedented. That's why cybersecurity is such a significant issue. But there's another factor at play here. There is something about the intangible nature of this threat. It's not physical. We've had many thousands of years to actually know how to respond to physical threats. Cyberspace, the internet, is a very young thing, and our reaction to crime or espionage or protest is different for some reason. So let's turn the intangible to the tangible with one example. Now, I'm calling out a US company here, not to make light of this company. It's an unfortunate but excellent example of why we have a significant issue. In this case, Anthem Blue Cross, a US health insurance and medical services company. Think of them as Bupa or Medibank Private, but just much bigger. They lost, or more clearly had stolen from them, 79 million customer records as a result of a hack. Pretty sure you'd know that 79 million is a big number. But for some reason, our response to cybercrime is not the same as physical crime. So let's look at this through the lens of good old-fashioned crime and go into the physical world. Prior to those records being online, if they were typed on an A4 sheet of paper, that'd be 1.4 million double-sided A4 sheets of paper. If that paper was stacked up here on stage next to me, it wouldn't fit in this room because it would go a kilometre high in the sky. You get the physical size. So now imagine me trying to take that stack of information and take it to a photocopier and try and copy it. I'd need a whopping great big step ladder for starters. I'd be physically moving that document and feeding into a machine, and even a fast photocopier, full time, no paper jams, automatic paper reload, 2 months best. I'm pretty sure someone would notice me doing that. Back and forward, 2 months, what is this guy doing? 2 months. And that's just to copy it. And then to steal it, I've got to take it, move it to the loading dock. Picture this, and I won't do the sound effects, but the truck is backing into the loading dock, the beep, beep, beep. Truck comes in, you load it up. One truck goes, another truck comes back in, you load it up, another truck. 3 trucks, 3 semi-trailers. I'm pretty confident someone would notice that crime. In cyberspace, that same amount of information in ones and zeros, sure, once the hackers have got on the network and know how to get it, in under 2 hours, that information is removed from their network and delivered to the other side of the planet. If you believe the attribution of who did that, and I'm not going to go there for reasons I'll explain shortly, it was delivered to the other side of the planet in under 2 hours. If you ever needed an example of crime or espionage, again, we can have that debate later, happening at a pace, scale and reach which is unprecedented, that's a great example. And that's why cybersecurity is a significant issue for individuals and businesses. Crime's not new, but the pace, scale and reach of the problem is. As Mark has said, and to quote Jim Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence in the United States, when he did come out and say that cybersecurity was the top national security threat for the United States, he also said the cyber threat cannot be eliminated. But he followed up with something which is really important. The risk can be managed. And that's important. The threat cannot be eliminated, but the risk can be managed. So let's now start talking about, okay, what do we do? First and foremost, this is not a technology risk. If any of you treat this only as a technology risk, you will not manage this risk effectively and your company and your customers will have a problem. It's a business risk first and foremost. And that's not me saying technical people and technical aspects are not important. That's not what I'm saying. It's a business risk first and foremost. Incredibly important you think about that. There's another action or things that are in play that I'm very passionate about and will be very critical about. Even if you get to this point of cybersecurity is a business risk, right, we've got that, you've got questions being asked from the board, I see a number of distractions that actually play here. There's a fascination in our industry, there's a fascination in the media, and there's a fascination in the world of the threat. People get paralysed by the threat. And there's a wonderful fascination of the who did it headline. So don't get me wrong, attribution is important, but attribution should not be your business's focus. There are great guys and girls in government agencies across the globe who do that well. Leave that to them. Leave that to the police force. Your business should not just focus on the fascination of who did it. I could not certainly ever want to find myself in front of Telstra's Audit Risk Committee talking about a problem and all I talk about is this alarming, sophisticated threat and I was done over by Icky Stan. Okay, they'll be fascinated for about a second and they'll say, well, how did it happen, Mike? And what can we do to make it right for our business and our customers? And what are we going to do to stop it happening again? That should be your focus. Don't get distracted by the attribution or the threat hype. Another interesting one that can get you distracted, people will say you need to spend more money to manage this risk effectively. Now you might find that strange, given my role in Telstra. Spending more money does not necessarily help you manage this risk more effectively. Buying a shiny new tool does not help you manage this risk effectively. There are some fundamentals you need to have in place before you attempt to go out and maybe change a few things and maybe invest in new things. And there's no doubt you will need to, but don't just do it for the sake of you're attracted by this shiny new thing that's on the market. The final distraction is what I call compliance distraction. Compliance does not equal good security. Good compliance knows why that compliance is there and what needs to be ticked to be compliant, not just pick your favourite framework and follow it for the sake of that might give you a sense of assurance, because it won't. Because if you don't know what you're trying to protect and why, you can't actually manage that risk effectively. Rachel Falk, who's sitting in the front here, used to work in my team running the cyber influence team. Every time we saw, and we still do this, every time we see a company with a data breach, we analyse it. We analyse it to look at, well, okay, let's think about this. Could that happen to Telstra? What would it mean to us? Are we prepared? we go through that. And that's not just in the telco sector, we look across the board. An interesting but important byproduct of the work of Rachel's team was also we analysed the press release and the media commentary of every breach. It's fascinating what you see written there. My favourite all-time comment, and there are many threads of this in many press releases, is this attack was designed to evade my defences. No kidding, Sherlock. What do you think criminals do when they, if they're a jewellery thief, figure out the alarm system, try and bypass it, get in and steal? That's what criminals do. To put that in a press release is not defensible for any company, because that sounds like you don't know what you're doing. The important thing about when you respond is you do it well. That one really does me, so be very careful. The other one is the word sophistication. You will never hear me say the threat is increasing, it's becoming more advanced, it's highly sophisticated, it's very sophisticated. Simple fact, this threat is real. It is a reasonably foreseeable event today that someone will attempt to hack from the outside or steal from the inside information from you. That's reasonably foreseeable. You should not be surprised by that. It's also reasonably foreseeable that someone will attempt to hack, to encrypt, to deny you access to data, or even do that from the inside. That's called extortion or ransom. Well-known problems. Another reasonable foreseeable event is someone will attempt to hack or to disrupt or attack to disrupt your organisation for a protest, they're disgruntled for whatever reason. They are all reasonably foreseeable events. No press release should ever say, we couldn't have possibly seen this. This attack was sophisticated, designed to evade our defences. That is just pure nonsense in 2016. To make it a little bit more complicated for you, there is a more sinister element that we don't yet talk too much about. If you think about a hacker, once they're on your network, what they do next is just a matter of intent. If I've done all that hard work to get on your network and understand where your crown jewels are or how your network's operating or your business is operating, I can steal, I can encrypt, I could disrupt, like happened to Sony Motion Pictures. Or maybe worse still, I could subtly manipulate data to cause a real-world physical response. That's a more insidious element to this threat that doesn't get spoken about, but does need to be thought about. The good news is, if you ask the right questions, you can get some knowledge, and from that you can make informed decisions. And the key point there is, don't forget, successful companies already know how to manage significant risks. I spend many conversations with people, and one of the topics that comes up frequently is, does our board need a cybersecurity expert? Actually, no, they don't. Not on the board. Successful companies, successful directors of successful companies know the right questions to ask, and they know how to manage significant risks. What they need some help with, though, from you guys and girls in the technical world, is the translation of all this complicated complexity and technical stuff of what it really means to your business, your customers, what they should be worried about, what actions they should take, or what decisions you need them to make in terms of managing that risk. Because if you do that and do that well, successful companies already know how to manage significant risks. My role in Telstra, Telstra's Chief Information Security Officer, simply I give the CEO, his leadership team, the chair of the Audit Risk Committee and our board 3 assurances. Pretty straightforward. Again, successful companies know how to do this in other significant risks. The first one is, have we, as a company, identified the right risks for our customers, first and foremost, and our company? The second assurance is, are we then managing those risks effectively? And we need to talk about that, and we need to report on that. The third one, which is equally, if not more important, because it recognises this, the threat cannot be eliminated, but the risk can be managed. No matter how good you are in 1 or 2, managing risk means you are taking risk. And when you're taking risk, actually, bad things will happen, as we see every day in the media in this regards. So do we have the capabilities and plans that are exercised, that are proven in place to respond really well and to recover when something bad happens in the risks that we're managing, the risks we've identified and the risks we're managing. 3 assurances, that's my role. But you've got to get some information and knowledge to get there. So how do we do that? Rachel Falk and I developed in Telstra what we call the 5 no's of cybersecurity. It's not what you might think from security professionals. It's not no, 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 which actually where the security world might have come from. I'm sure none of you are like that. Security's got to enable your business. It's got to help your business run fast. It's got to help your business run fast by managing this risk effectively. So it's the 5 no's, or KNOW. 5 simple questions that might make you uneasier once you've got answers to them, but then you can make some informed decisions about what risks you are prepared to take, what risks you're not prepared to take, and then you're getting to the point of actually managing your risk effectively. The first no, know the value of your data. Do you know the value of data is the question. Interestingly, when Rachel and I have done this talk many times now, people talk about what's the dollar value of the... No, I'm not talking about the dollar value. Let me give you an example. Here it's important as a business, you know the value of your data to your customers first and foremost, your business, maybe your competitors, and then you've got to understand the criminal space, and by criminal I'll put everyone, including nation states, of actually who might see value in your information. A recent example, a hospital in the United States in Boston suffered a hack, and to my surprise, because actually I hadn't thought about this one, that's why I think it's a great example, X-rays were being stolen. Now, what's the value of an X-ray? Well, of course, they're valuable to the person having treatment. They're valuable to the medical practitioner using that as a diagnostic tool to help treat a patient or care for a patient. But actually, in some countries, to immigrate, you need to be clear of tuberculosis. So some enterprising young or old criminal gang understood the value of that data, and they were stealing it to get clean imagery of X-rays so I could pass, or their clients could pass it off. Nearly gave it away then. I'm not in the business of smuggling people into countries illegally. Who would have thought that was interesting? But actually, we shouldn't be surprised. I wasn't surprised, but I realised when I heard it, actually I hadn't thought about that. The key point here is you need to help your business, whatever it is, understand what valuable data you have, not just to your customers and your business, but maybe those people who can use it for other ill-gotten gains. Once you know the value of your data, it's incredibly important to know who has access to your data, not just in your company, but in your supply chain. Because if I asked you this question, how many people outsource payroll or outsource legal advice or outsource something else? That includes that outsourcer, and there's nothing wrong with outsourcing, having access to your data to help you run the business. Do you know in their business who has access to the data through their supply chain? Incredibly important you know that. Then you've got to know where your data is. And I want to make something clear here. I hear this a lot, and I hear this a lot talking to our customers in Telstra. Some people have a notion that if my data is in Australia, it's safer than if it was overseas. Bum bum. Got news for you. The internet doesn't work that way. It's a false sense of security. Sure, if you put your data in a jurisdiction, and I'll make one up, Upper Ikistan, and they don't have a rule of law, and they have a rapacious appetite for commercial intelligence, yeah, don't put it there, know where it is. But actually the notion of it's somewhere else out of Australia, it can't be as safe as it is here, is a silly notion. No disrespect to anyone who holds that view, because actually the internet doesn't work that way. The internet is open for business 24/7, 365 days of the year, and it knows no geographical bounds. But as a business, it's important to know where your data is for a whole range of reasons, including, regardless of whether I have that view or not, if my customer wants their data in Australia, it's got to be in Australia. It's what the customer wants. You've got to respond to the customer. Do you know who is protecting your data? An oldie but a goodie. You'd be surprised. Some people might think, well, it's the IT department, they've made a deal. Actually, sometimes in this world of wonderful opportunity, parts of your business might actually start doing stuff and they push the data out to someone else and haven't gone through the IT department. Nothing wrong with that. But then as an organisation, do you know who's got access to your data? Many examples I could talk about how well-meaning people use some app to collaborate on something and they don't realise they've just given ownership of that data by using that app to a third party. That may be okay, but if it's very sensitive information, maybe that's not so clever. And finally, do you know how well your data is protected? And that's where the techies come in. But don't start at the technical point. Know the value of your data, know who has access to your data, know where your data is, know who's protecting your data, and know how well it's protected. And if you can answer those 5 questions, you have gone a long way to understanding what risk you are taking and how well you're managing it. We've done this exercise in Telstra. We went through 11 business units. As a result, a little bit more uncomfortable maybe, but I'm relaxed. 165 recommendations, nothing major, but there were some things that we needed to address. That's good risk management. And now we're informed by answers to these 5 questions across 11 business units. Incredibly useful questions that you can ask or help your business ask. So now I'm going to change it up. Not asking questions of your organisation or your supply chain. And I want to talk about something that is really technically, I've still got a bit of geek in me that's near and dear to my geek heart. And this is asking questions of the data your organisation already has. We call this discovery. Discovery is a capability that is clever people, so these are people with a curious mind, maybe not your traditional technical background, but they've got a passion for technology. They have a clever, critical mind, a curious mind, and they will keep asking questions of the data until they get an answer which is acceptable from a risk management point of view. But as Mark's talked about, the scale of this problem is significant, so people can't do this alone. So we also apply very clever mathematics. And in this case, it's unsupervised machine learning that churns through our network data, and we've applied this to our corporate network currently, but it will go broader on Telstra's networks. The computer algorithms do not know what good or bad is. It's just very clever at characterising noisy normal, because let's face it, the use of the internet, the use of a network, activity on a network is a very noisy thing on any given day. But the computer can characterise that and identify anomalies. And then those anomalies are presented to very clever people who look at what that anomaly is. And I'm about to share with you 3 real-world examples from Telstra. So this is not made up. These are real problems that we found using our discovery capability. The first one, bad robot, naughty people. So in this example, our corporate network logs, so for the technical-minded people in the room, this is 30 million event logs per hour, 10 terabytes of data per month. Actually, these days, not big numbers, so it's very manageable. And the algorithms are churning through the data, and in this case, it found an anomaly. Now again, remember, it doesn't know what good and bad is, but it's found this anomaly and it presents to the user, there's an anomaly with this thing that's got an N number. A clever user in Telstra knows that an N number is a robot account. A robot account is one of those things that sits in the background doing program tasks that humans are not meant to use other than set them up. So you've got an N number. What's the artifacts associated with the anomaly? 2 artifacts. The first one is this robot account is downloading large amounts of data into Telstra's network. Phew, at least it's coming into the network, not leaving the network. Maybe that's okay. The second anomaly, there's web browsing activity associated with this robot account. Google, YouTube, Google Docs, so forth. Clearly there is a user using a robot account. That's breach of policy. You might say, so what? Well, actually, what happens if one of those web browsing sessions goes to a website that is a watering hole that maliciously infects the server that that person's doing that from? Bad. That behaviour is putting our networks at risk. The investigation closed down, finding 5 people who had a little arrangement, sharing account credentials, using a robot account for goodness knows what. 1 person was running a business. Not declared. Obviously, we've dealt with that matter. Clever mathematics, clever people can find a risk. So this was risky behaviour, putting our customers' data and our networks at risks, found by a machine, investigated by a clever human being. You can do this at scale. So it was bad robot. It wasn't the robot's fault. It was the naughty person, and you wouldn't be surprised by that. You might notice a theme here, bad human. In this case, bad humans. And this one was a trusted partner of Telstra's who, through commercial arrangements, is managing some stuff for us, some infrastructure. So again, the computer churns through, not knowing what good and bad it looks like, and it comes up with this anomaly. And interestingly, the anomaly is presented to the user, IP address range, 15-hour period of where a Chrome browser is being downloaded, used, and then deleted. Okay, that's interesting. What's the IP address range? It might be a user in their laptop. No, the server range is the DVI server farm. That's the infrastructure that feeds displays to our call centres. If I was a cyber criminal, if I was a criminal, I'd want to be on that because I could screen scrape passwords. Okay, so it's infrastructure. Again, we don't allow people to go web browsing from servers. They do that from their laptops. We don't allow our trusted partners to do that. Clearly, these clever people had found a way to do some web browsing. What were they browsing? A bank, their online bank. I will not mention the bank. It's not an Australian bank. Okay, they're doing their banking. If you miss one character, you go to a malicious site because the criminals know that. That's how they phish you. That malicious site, if they'd mistyped their bank, would have infected that server infrastructure. Again, the clever computer found 11 people doing this practice of downloading a browser, doing their banking, and then deleting the browser. And why were they doing that? Because their employer wouldn't let them to do their internet banking on their work computers. We allow our staff to do personal use on their work computers because that's the connected world in which we live in. In this case, this trusted partner had allowed 11 of its staff to put our networks at risk. You can imagine the fun conversation we have with that company. Now, that's not to say that company's bad, because actually you might have people in your organisation right now doing the same thing. Risky behaviour, putting your networks and your data at risk. Again, found by the clever mathematics, going through those billions of events, finding anomalies which turned out to be problematic. The final example, bad software, or is this out of place activity, or is it something different? This one's pretty straightforward. The computer churns up an anomaly, it's presented to the operator, the clever person looks at it, sees the IP address, that's one IP address of a computer. Okay, where is that? Finds there's an account number, that's a Telstra staff member. Okay, so it's one computer, Telstra staff member. Turns out and the anomaly is happening overnight. 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, looks like heartbeat, but it's associated with Active Directory. Okay, that's interesting. We are 24/7, might be okay. Actually, the IP address was of a computer in a Telstra shop. We haven't yet gone to 24/7 shopping in our retail stores. So what's that about? Turns out a user just left their account logged on, but it was anomalous activity. Now, you might say there's nothing wrong with that. Leaving an account logged on is kind of not really clever, because if I'm a criminal again and I find an active or inactive account, I might get on that and use that because it's left logged on and I've got some privileges if that account's got the right privileges, or I can escalate from there. Again, asking the right questions of your organisation and your data can help you manage this risk effectively, and Discovery we are finding to be extremely effective for us. In closing, it's important to also note, and this is the one difference between that great video at the start and what I'm going to say, and I know this wasn't the intent of the video, there is no 100% security solution. Absolutely not. And if anyone tries to sell that to you, you should run a mile. This is a risk management exercise. You cannot eliminate this threat, but you can manage this risk effectively. If you ask the right questions, you can do that. If you have the assurance that you've identified the right risks, you're managing the risk effectively, and you're prepared when something bad happens, because it will, then you are managing this risk effectively. Thank you very much.